And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Business Focus Live with me, John, where we talk about business related topics as well as news from here and around the world. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and let's get started. And we're back. Thank you again for joining me today. To get things started, this week's episode, we'll be talking about things that has been happening or has happened the past week, interesting stuff that I'd like to share. First is we'll be talking about the latest series that has been launched for quite some time, Cowboy Bebop. Is it a good adaptation from its animated version? Actually, I've watched the live action versus the animated, and I also watched a critic review from Angry Joe, which we'll discuss in a bit. Anyway, apart from that, segueing to Netflix as well, many of their shows that they're streaming gets very little to no review in terms of how well it does in terms of its metrics. And now Netflix is being more open to that possibility so that viewers can see how each film, TV shows, or any shows that they showcase in their platform is really actually doing, typical to how movies does in the movie theaters and so forth. Next, we'll be also talking about a company who has no, what you would say, not their core strength in terms of being in this particular industry or producing this particular product, but they chose to do so by producing a different spin to a typical smartphone, the Balmuda Phone. So we'll talk about that, what makes it interesting. And then next, we'll also be talking about companies trying to tap into AR or VR, augmented reality and virtual reality, and what are its possibilities, in terms of its actual application. Obviously in films you see the possibility there, and there are companies who have been trying to utilize that, but to varying degrees of success or failures. Particularly Google's glasses is an example. And lastly, we'll be talking about when you talk of using smartphones, it's not ideal, it's illegal, and it's not safe for people using smartphones while driving on a vehicle. And in particular, in the UK, they've made it more punitive in terms of a penalty fee for drivers who are using their smartphone. So we'll talk about that as well. Anyway, so to start off, as mentioned, the TV series Cowboy Bebop. Now, I've seen the TV series showcase in the dashboard in Netflix, but I wasn't curious at the time. But as time passes by, I saw they were showcasing also the animated one. But for me, I watched the live action first, and it was interesting. But the question here, as comparisons is unavoidable, is the live action live up to the expectation of its predecessor in terms of the animation? And based on the reviews, there are a lot of varying opinions as to, obviously, if you follow the animated version, you have high expectation for the live version, so you will be disappointed if that's the case. But if you haven't watched the animated version and you only watch the live action version, you could say it's passable, because at the end of the day, regardless of the medium or the type of content, TV series or films, it's all about the content, right? The stories, how the writers create the story and present it to an audience, in our case us. And typically it should be an easy thing to do, in a sense, because they have story materials to follow, and for some reason they want to veer away from the source material. Now, I'm okay with that if they want to change the main content, not say change the main content, but try to put a twist to make it somewhat different in its to its counterpart. But obviously, if it's not any better, then why do it? And obviously the how you present it or focus on the stories of the characters will be the key determining factor. And for the story here, they have three main characters here, right? You have Jet, uh, Speak Spiegel, and Faye. So how they present it, and obviously the stars who played those characters did a remarkable job. But in terms of how the dialogues were created and the story plot was, you know, could do some more work, especially how they delve into the love story of Speak Spiegel here, and obviously the main protagonist here, but the antagonist in the story, which is uh, vicious, but how they presented in the story looks so wimpy, not so vicious in terms of believability. That's why it destroys the image of, obviously you try to build up, similar how they try to build up the character of Thanos throughout the release of several MCU films, right? All the way to the culmination in Avengers Endgame here. And obviously, it could have been better. And obviously for Netflix here, their goal is to gain traction in terms of more subscribers, and obviously getting a lot of its existing subscribers, meaning 200 million subscribers, to watch different types of content, not just for this one, but for future contents that they're going to release. And obviously, if you haven't watched it, there's somewhat of a teaser of there's going to be a season 2 after this one. Now, in the original animation, there's more clarity in terms of it only finished up to the first season, so there's no continuation. But obviously for Netflix here, if it becomes a hit, or it has a following of sorts, it makes sense for them to capitalize on it, and obviously to continue producing more episodes, similar to how The Witcher was popular. Looking forward to second season. And then you also have Stranger Things. Funny enough, I haven't even started watching that series, which have been to rave reviews. Hopefully one of these days I can start watching the the series itself. Anyway, let's take a closer look on the article here. So obviously, Netflix is trying to tap into the animated genre here, not just focusing on films, because for the many films that they're trying to produce, to varying degrees of success as well. I think they partnered with Adam Sandler to create several films. I've watched some of it. I think Murder Mystery was one. It was okay. I mean, if it were to be launched in, let's say, in a movie theater, I don't know if it would do that really well. But obviously, the exclusivity deal, carries a lot to entice, big fans of Adam Sandler. Then I think there's also a tie-up with comedian Kevin Hart. So I've seen some of his films. I think there was one that was shown with Bryan Cranston. I think it's The Upside. It's a nice story, but obviously that's not exclusive to Netflix. But anyway, so translating the different genres, or different, from books, from comics, or in this case, even manga, it should be an easy thing to do, in a sense, because if you were to actually just copy the content itself and produce it in a live action form, I think the main followers would watch it nonetheless. And you can only do better in terms of if you were just to carbon copy here. And obviously in terms of its presentation, they try to stick with the noir theme of the animation version here. But obviously, in terms of how the writers, scriptwriter, or the director presented it, it's something could be improved upon here. And let's see here, we can see a few. So you can see especially the introduction here. So it looks nice, especially the character of Jan Cho. I mean, is he the best character to do the main character here? He does a great job here. And what's funny enough here is, when you think of the character Jan Cho, the first thing that comes to mind is his first film that made him popular. If you remember, when Harold and Kumar goes to White Castle, comes to mind, and obviously he's done more films after that. So, it's still fresh on my mind in terms of how he started out. And obviously, there are other characters here. You have Jet and Faye here. Now, what's interesting here, uh, the character who plays Jet here, you have Alex. Is it Alex? Yeah. Does a great job, but in terms of the story arc here, they included a family here, but that was not mentioned in the animated version here. And uh, who else here? Faye is another one. So they made her more prominent here in the animation, but actually the love story of Julia, they made her more prominent also. I think there was debate with regards to what do you call this. I watched the critique from Angry Joe show with regards how they portrayed those female characters, trying to bring in more, being more inclusive, I think, so that they can gain more traction with a wider audience. But again, I'm fine with it if it creates a better story and more interesting presentation. But as I mentioned, how they presented the villain here, Vicious, looks nowhere intimidating. So in terms of the conflict between the protagonist and the antagonist, doesn't makes much sense or compelling in a sense. And then the twist that they try to incorporate in terms of the ending itself, I leave it up to you to decide whether you agree or not. But to my taste and to Mr. Joe's taste also, is kind of disappointing. And obviously they're trying to hype up the following season in terms of its continuation of the story, and creates bigger questions, more problems, because how are you going to continue the story arc now? Obviously they can go beyond the scope of what the animated stories was told, and obviously it didn't continue after that. So it's up to the writers here to explore other what do you call this, other story arcs, create more characters here and so forth. And I think the key here is creating the dynamics of the main characters here, from Jet Speak Spiegel, as well as Faye, I think is the key here. And obviously at the end of the day, it's all about the stories, so people can get attached to their characters and make it compelling to follow them throughout the story arcs, not through one episode, but through the entire series and even beyond here. Anyway, let's see here. Now, Netflix mentioned here seem to have learned from what their own Death Note debacle is trying to avoid here. But the main issue here is they're always looking for popular series that they can adopt for live action, which is nice. But obviously how do you call this? How they adapt it or present it in a live action manner is the key here. And it's not just in the animated version here. And obviously trying to make blockbuster films like Red Notice, the most recent one with Gal Gadot, Ryan Reynolds, and The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. And obviously shelling, the company has a lot of money to burn, but the question is, will it get the desired result here? Now obviously for a company like Netflix, obviously their goal here is to gain traction, acquire new subscribers, to be the dominant market leader, as well as retain those subscribers. Obviously, gaining traction in terms of adding more subscribers over several periods, months, years, and so forth, means nothing if they are not staying tuned to your platform and watching more content, as they subscribe to your service. And obviously, to be able to do that, you have to offer a variety of content. That's why they're offering what they're offering here, from comedies to dramas to live action to whatever content, right, from young and old, so that you have a plethora of contents to watch. And what's interesting is they're also acquiring older films, which I appreciate that much, so I can watch retro films, also old TV series. An example, the series that I've been watching retro. I've watched several times the Star Trek series, DS9, Deep Space Nine. And then I recently finished the series Star Trek: The Next Generation, and then now I'm watching the Criminal Minds series here. So I watched bunch of it in the actual run, and now online I could watch it at my leisure. So if I have free time, I'll watch it and try to follow the story arcs as mentioned, and obviously makes it compelling so that they retain your subscription services here, and obviously offering what do you call this, offering popular TV series like the Big Bang Theory, you have Friends, and then Downtown Abbey, which I thought I wasn't going to watch. I did watch it, not just the series but as well as the film. And good news, there's going to be a sequel to the Downtown Abbey film, and so it makes it compelling. So meaning Netflix is doing a great job of trying to retain your patronage, so to speak. But obviously, at the end of the day, to engage the viewer, you have to offer a lot of compelling content here. And is it just shelling out hundreds of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars is what I'm trying to say. Is it enough to create a successful formula similar to how big studios make films here? That's not always the case here, right? And obviously, it's all about the story here, and if it's a compelling case, doesn't matter if it's a big budgeted film or a small budgeted film. If it succeeds, and obviously the smaller the budget, the more chances that you can produce more films. And if you have a hit in one of those, I think there will always be a niche for people to like certain types of film over others. And obviously it's much easier to invest in those types of film because very little risk in terms of it's going to be shown regardless, and there will always be people who will like certain types of film over others. And it's a cycle that can benefit Netflix over the long run here. Anyway, but the question here is, do you like the TV series Bebop, Cowboy Bebop? Now, based on my experience, I enjoyed it, even though I had no experience watching the animated. But I tend to agree the point of view of Mr. Angry Joe regarding the story arc and how it veered away from its core concept or core idea of its animated counterpart. So I think there's room for improvement. And obviously, if you're a big anime lover, in particular of the series, you'll be you'll be strikingly disappointed, which is understandable. That's why we expect more from our streaming platform, or in this case, the one who's trying to create that vision here. And another example, I think, is adopting popular games like Resident Evil. I think there was a recent launch of the Resident Evil Raccoon City, I think. And the idea is there. They're trying to give that sense of vibe of how the game was portrayed, but obviously the characters was a problem. And then you also have the actors who play the characters are not would be ideal in terms of Leon Kennedy, who's the other police officer? I keep forgetting the name. But the point here is, if it's not true to the game or in the comics or even in the manga series, then it breaks the immersion here. And for my taste, I'd rather you come up with an original story so that at least there's little to no comparison can be made. So you'll be only, what do you call this, you'll be evaluated in terms of the merits of the film or the content, if it's a good experience, is the story nice, and so forth. Because if you're going to do what Netflix is doing in terms of live action adaptation, which they plan to do more, and I think there were not rumors, there were mentions that I think even Amazon was in those streaming services is planning to make a live adaptation of the Mass Effect gaming game, which was produced by EA. So I'm hoping that they could do justice who's going to play Commander Shepard here, and who will be those his crew in terms of the aliens that he's going to meet along the way. So one is always optimistic, but somewhat realistic also, in a sense that they tend to do a terrible job here unless they can get a creator who understands the story behind the game itself. Similar how Kevin Feige does in the MCU, trying to bring the story arc together, but obviously that's a more difficult, daunting task of creating the MCU universe here compared to just a single game or even an animated series here. Anyway, next we have here, sticking to Netflix still. Obviously, Netflix is one of the biggest streaming platforms in the world. Lagging behind is still Disney Plus, but they're trying to make headway. That's why Disney has been acquiring, a lot of big popular franchises from the MC. They own MCU. You have Star Wars, and then leveraging that and to varying results again with regards to focusing on releasing their films, big films, on their streaming platform to be able to entice more subscribers that would use their platform over going to the competition, which is Netflix here. But what's interesting here, Netflix doesn't provide any insight as to, if you look at their dashboards, whether the film is doing well or not. It's just there for you to peek, to watch, and then that's it. Now, obviously, feedback from consumers or viewers is always important, but obviously, if you're Netflix, you want to keep it a close guarded secret in terms of the data that you were willing to share. Shout out to Amazon. I'm sure Google does that also, even Facebook. Those big tech companies, once they have the information, they rather not share all of it, or even very too little, and it's somewhat subjective still. But here, obviously, with the competition over Disney's Plus, so it makes sense for Netflix now to provide some more information as to how certain contents are being accepted, viewed by the viewers here. So let's see here. So obviously the goal here is to understand more if certain films that whether Netflix produce or showcase is doing really well. And obviously not all of the exclusive Netflix films or content, like in this case now, would you say the Red Notice film, if you've watched it, would you say it would be a big blockbuster hit? Obviously, it has the big names that here. You have Ryan Reynolds, you have The Rock, you also have Gal Gadot here. But in terms of the story here, I wouldn't say it would be a big hit here. But since it's only showcased in the streaming platform, I would consider it would be a big hit here, and a lot of people would watch this film. And they've invested a lot of money here. I think, what was the amount they spent? In the north of 100 million? Less than 200 million, I think. And I'm assuming majority of that expense went to the stars themselves. And again, at the end of the day, regardless of the star power, is the film a great one in terms of story, character development, and the overall presentation here. And again, sad to say again, they tried to at the end, try to showcase that there's a hint of a sequel here. So I don't know. It would depend if how it does well in the platform here. So let's see. Let's take a closer look. So Netflix is now showcasing a new online hub to share viewership data about its top TV shows and movies. I think this is important. Similar how the Nielsen ratings works in the United States, to show if certain contents are being viewed by how much of the viewers, and in particular the particular demographic that obviously the advertisers are looking forward to. And what's interesting, it only comes after years when the streaming giant revealed only selective audience data. As I mentioned, they're being protective of their data, and obviously they have the right to do that. But at the end of the day, if you give more information and you're more transparent with your audience, I mean, if you have a great product here and with proper marketing, I mean, people would support it, right? But if it's a terrible film or a terrible show, no one would watch it. And one thing that I'd like to commend for Netflix is by offering TV shows, original Netflix TV shows that doesn't have a lot of episodes. Typical in the United States, they have 20 plus episodes. I mean, at a certain point, it gets tiring if you watch it, you know, consecutively, especially if you're binge watching it. But obviously, at the time when they originally aired those shows, you can watch it throughout the year, so it's not as stressful in a sense. So I mean, even I currently watching the Criminal Minds TV series. I watch it in spurts if I have free time and doing leisure activities. Then I will watch it in certain parts, and that's why I would watch the whole bit. I would skip if there are boring parts in the stories, which I don't know if you others watching now do the same thing as well. Also, the analyst mentioned that it's not the whole picture, but it's still valuable new weapon in streaming wars. Now, obviously, in a sense, they're trying to showcase that they're doing a tremendous job competing with obviously the other platforms. You have Paramount Plus, Peacock, and you also have Amazon Video. Is it Video? And then obviously you have Disney here as the main competitor here. Uh, So it's nearly 10 years. Netflix has reversed course in their policy of sharing the information, as mentioned, by sharing public viewership data, which I think is important here. And just to show here, it's not just showcasing what are the trending films that people are watching, but also how much people are watching of that particular, what do you call this, particular showcase. I think there was a film that they made was a big flop. It was comedy. Let me see. What was it? Crap, I forgot what film was it. Let me see here. Comedy. Do they have comedy? I think it's Super Force. I think. Keep forgetting what. Crap, I forgot what the name of the film was. Crap, I forgot. So meaning not all films that has been developed or produced by Netflix did really well. Now obviously you don't want to highlight that. You wanted to highlight films that did really well, or TV shows that did really well, like in the case the Stranger Things series. And what else, you also have The Witcher. And obviously not everyone is liking the other series, but the Korean Squid Game is another one that people enjoy. Well, actually I enjoyed as well. So you also have Squid Game. So it's, if you look at its sharing, it commanded a 1.6 billion hours of viewing in the first month alone. So you could just imagine its popularity. That's why when we discussed the ISP provider in South Korea is trying to sue Netflix, it was kind of funny because it's not Netflix's fault that the show was that popular in South Korea, and maybe their pricing was not, and maybe their infrastructure was ready, capable of handling the load of its popularity here. And my question here is, if it's a successful, will they be able to capitalize on it? Obviously, investing in several TV series, not just in the United States, but in other parts of the world here also. So here they go and mention there are a number of reasons why it makes sense for Netflix to lift the veil to showcase the metrics here. So obviously, based on their 200 million a little over 200 million subscribers, can make a show a hit or not just because it has that strength in followers. So you can just imagine if you have even just a fraction of the total population of 200 million. Let's say you have 10% of that, which is 20 million, still a lot of people watching it. So you can just imagine the multiplication numbers in terms of viewing hours. So you can already identify that if it's a big hit. And I don't know how you do the math here. What, 1.6 billion hours divided by the, let's see here. So if it's, so how many episodes did they have? I think they have 10 episodes. Let's assume there's 10 hours there, right? So 1.65 billion. Oh, crap. 65 billion divided by 10 hours. That's a lot of people. Is it 10 hours? There's 16 billion? There's just something wrong. 16 billion people? Ah, it might be because there were repeats of watching it. Similar to my case, I watched it the first time around and then I rewatch it for a second time to see if there's anything in the story that I missed. And there are parts that I did enjoy more, so I wanted to watch it again. So again, it just goes to show you in terms of viewership, the number of subscribers, gives you more insight as to which of their films or shows did really well and makes a compelling case rather than hide it. That's why I love what do you call this? I love the movie industry in terms of the films being shown in movie theaters because it's out there in terms of how many tickets were sold, so you all know already how many people watched the film in terms of its revenue. So it's very difficult for movie makers, studios, or in this case, streaming services to hide those numbers, and it's very transparent. If people watch it, you'll see, in the tens of hundreds of millions of dollars or even billion if it does really well. That's why, considering the MCU franchise, after the Avengers Endgame, as we've discussed in the past, now after that you can see Eternals, it's not doing real well. What do you call this? The Black Widow film is not doing really well, and even Shang-Chi, even though it looks nice, but again, the story wise, at the end of the day, regardless if I like it or not, the question is the majority of viewers, moviegoers, enjoyed the content, and if they did not like it, no, it will show in the revenue in terms of how much it have accumulated, not just domestically, which has, with all the media press of how hyping it up, how well it did, and so forth. But at the end of the day, after months of showcasing it, it's nowhere near to other MCU films that has produced in the north of 500 million to close to a billion or even more. So at the end of the day, being more transparent, I think, provides a more closeness with the relationship between the streaming services as well as the movie goers as well here. So people, would know and actually support if there's certain contents that a lot of people are watching, and I would be curious enough to see. Maybe this is it. Like how the Squid Game was. It was that popular. I wasn't interested at the beginning, but when I started watching the first one and this next one, then obviously I have to finish the whole series, and then I watched it the entirety, right? So people would be inclined to support the show, the streaming platform, and obviously this will benefit the platform here. And obviously, if Netflix keeps on curating more content in their library, regardless of new and old, obviously those mix of plethora of options will be compelling enough for me not to look for a different platform. I was seriously considering at the time when they released last year the Wonder Woman 1984 on subscribe to HBO Max, but aside for that film, I had no reasons to subscribe. Maybe watch the Game of Thrones series, but it's not enough for me to switch. So I don't know. It's my that's based on my taste anyhow. Anyway, next we have here is a company again who's trying to capitalize on augmented reality or AR, and as well as virtual reality here. So we have a company here, Meta, who's trying to copy. Obviously, they're not the only company who's trying to do that. You have other companies like Google who's trying to use virtual augmented reality with their Google Glass, so you can what you see in the future, like I think the film in Ready Player One, right? You wear a typical like an Oculus headgear, and you can play in a virtual reality or maybe somewhat combination of a augmented reality. Now, other benefits to that, obviously, it depends on the application where you plan to use it. Will it make it easier? I think the ideal, I think this is my opinion, for augmented reality to work, I think you can do away with smartphones, and then you have whether it's your eyewear or your not smartphone, your watch, that could augment and create that visual that your what you expect to do, like in films. You can see a floating screen, you can just click and then call, or you can watch that, you're the only one who can see it rather than everyone beside you could see it. But I don't know if we'll get that in anytime soon or within my lifetime. But companies are trying to push the boundaries here. So let's see here. So the company here is Meta, as mentioned. uh, so augmented reality, obviously trying to replicate what you see in reality, but uh, as the term suggests, augment, that there are more. But obviously the intricacies, the complications of developing those technologies is it's not easy here. So here we have a company, Meta One, has been working on a haptic glove project for the past 7 years, and obviously being able to replicate it in a virtual environment. So let's say you're in a highly volatile situation, so the person cannot be in that particular area, so you need someone to do it, whether it's robotics, or in this case you use augmented reality or virtual reality to replicate the activities of an actual person being present here. And it's not easy. Obviously you need a lot of computing power to be able to do that, and obviously still work in progress here. So according here, the biggest challenge facing augmented and virtual reality is immersion. Yeah. So I think similar to what films are trying to develop here. And imagine, I think the way of the future for augmented reality, similar to how they offer 3D glasses. And I think the idea, I think this is just my opinion, that you will be part of the film itself, not just looking from a third person view, but you'll be part of the film, similar to how the Free Guy film works. So you're part of the NPC character there, and then you're interacting with the film itself. So from that point of view there, I don't know if that's possible, but obviously virtual reality is already here with Oculus VR, which is owned by Facebook. So I have a lot of issues with regards to their data privacy. That's why I was thinking at the time of purchasing one, but in terms of they're requiring you to link up your account with your Facebook account because they want to gain more information, which is bordering data privacy, which I think has gone to that point. But people have choices in terms of you want to support their company and so forth. But obviously in terms of offering that virtual reality is they're making a lot of headways and improvements. But at the end of the day, there's still limitations of what the Oculus can do and what type of games that can be played. I think, as I recall, when I was younger, there was an arcade machine where it doesn't necessarily use augmented reality or virtual reality, but it uses infrared or cameras that simulate your movement. It's a first-person shooter. You have a gun, and if you try to duck, and the character in the screen would also duck as well, or hide in a particular wall or structure, depending on how you move in real life, it would be translated in the game as well. And uh, I found it interesting at the time, and we're here now 10-20 years later, and still a long ways to go in terms of development here. And according to the company, has been tackling the issue head on, creating new soft actuators and that generate less heat than existing mechanical actuators. Now, obviously, there are still limitations, right, in terms of adaptability and usability and functionality, if you think about it. So you can see here on the left side, you can see that the person is wearing a headgear. It looks weird if you can see that in the real world. Obviously, for gaming purposes, I think that's making a lot of headway. But for everything else, I don't know if there's any real or good application. Maybe for education, but still, you have to rely on the headgear, which is very expensive. And you can see what the person is seeing in their reality, and you can interact with it and so forth. So is it compelling enough? I think it's more on a luxury rather than a necessity here, if you think about it. And it was mentioned another key element involved in bringing touch to the metaverse is hand tracking. Now, obviously, making it immersive is the key here, as mentioned. And Obviously, we haven't reached to that point where when you touch something in thin air and you can get that haptic feedback that they mentioned. Still goes a long way here. But if they can do that, I think that would make a significant change or shift in terms of interaction with augmented or virtual reality here. Anyway, next we have here, so as we mentioned earlier, a smartphone maker in Japan who's not known for making smartphones. In particular, they were known for making appliances, which is kind of funny. They pursued this and created the Balmuda Phone, which is compact and has similarities with an HTC One X model or 10 Vive model, according to 9 to 5 Google. So let's see here. So as you can see here, the phone is nothing too spectacular. That's not going to compete with any Samsung smartphones or even Apple phones here. But it has a different purpose here. So obviously, the main goal of the company here is to focus more on the functionality of what a phone would be used for, and obviously for an appliance company, I think they want to promote more in terms of their products, I think, and offering better functionality and ergonomics here. Now, in terms of features, it has the bells and whistles of a typical phone, but in terms of its ergonomics, so let's see here. So you can see it looks bulky, but if you notice here, it's easy to handle it at the palm of your hand. And I think obviously we've reached to a point. I mean, even my S21 Ultra, as you can see here, it's a bit big. I should have chosen the standard S21 model, but I was looking for a bigger screen real estate, so that's why I chose the bigger one. But I'm having second thoughts now, but that's too late now. But for this one, the Balmuda Phone, as mentioned, is using an Android one and has similarities with the HTC One model, and it has a Pixel for a specification. So let's take a closer look here. So it was mentioned here that the phone was designed for a shape that fits naturally in your hand. Now, it's not just the size that they focus on, but also is the back curve. So making it form factor, so when you grip it, it's tightly. Obviously, this particular phone, the S21, it's flat. So if you don't grip it properly, it might slip out of your hand. Now, thankfully, I have a case that can absorb the impact, so I'm not worried about that. But obviously, if it's a smaller phone, you can easily grip it better, so it would not drop off, similar to like this one, a water bottle. So it's curved, so it's easily grippable, so you have more surface to attach to it. Not necessarily if it's a smartphone, because you're only gripping it on the side, the edges on the sides, so there's less contact point that you can grip. So I think the feature they're offering, it's for practical purposes here. Now, in terms of display, proportion does not only include any straight lines. So let's see here. So it's not big as mentioned. So it only has 4.8 each screen, and it has a 1080p screen. So basic enough, not too big. And in terms of its battery, 2500 milliamps. So not that big also. But if it doesn't, eat up a lot of battery resources, so I think it could last longer, because, for me, that's why I chose this one, because it has a bigger battery capacity, so it could last longer, well, a day technically. And then it has already USB Type-C, which is, I think, remarkable. Shout out to Apple. Anyway, it has the Snapdragon chip, the 765, with 6 gigabytes of RAM, which is okay. And then you have an internal storage of 128 gigabytes. So pretty substantial. Not that big, but not too small also. And then it has Pixel 4a 5G, so it has the latest features, and has a 48 megapixel rear camera, which I thought that when I read this article, that they would have a less inferior capacity or megapixel here, but they didn't skip on that one. And what's interesting here, it has an 8 megapixel front facing camera here. And then it has NFC and an IP44 water and dust-proof ratings, which, you know, a phone needs to have this, I think, basic features for all of it, especially if you're paying tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, or even pesos. That, you know, you expect that a device would be that reliable and would be used for several years, not just a yearly investment and so forth. So it looks like this one. So you can see here. So in terms of its shape, it's not that big, but you know, the curve feature, I think it's, you know, obviously when you place it on top of a table, it won't be as flat, so it would be wobbling on top of the table. But obviously when you're holding it, using it for daily usage, I think it has provide a better functionality there as well. So it has Android 11 phone custom software and running Google services. You have typical Chrome, Play Store, the search, Gmail, Drive, and the whatnot here. So is it a compelling case for people to purchase these types of game? Maybe. You know, obviously, if it's at the end of the day, it's all about the pricing here, and if it's affordable enough, I think people would be compelled to buy, especially for price conscious people, right? And if it offers tremendous value, I think they're offering. Oh wait, how much? The unlocked Balmuda phone will cost around 104,000 yen. So roughly, it's kind of expensive. So that's roughly around 50,000 pesos. So not even $900 if you convert it. Yeesh. So roughly around 40 to 50,000. So it's not cheap. So unless they offer something else that would be unique, unless I don't know. I don't think it would be a worthwhile investment if that's the case here. But you know, who knows? You know, people always like certain designs, but will it be a big sell in the market? We'll see. Anyway, lastly, for our last story, sticking with smartphones. Obviously, smartphones have been a big, what do you call this? Big part of our culture way since, you know, the invention or the popularity of Nokia phones way back in the 90s. And obviously, you know, it has brought tremendous benefit and accessibility in terms of communication, usability, and so forth. But obviously, one of the downsides of using a smartphone is, and especially if you try to do too much, doing multitasking tasks, especially when driving, can be dangerous and catastrophic, and you know, could be caught in an accident, and you know, lives could be lost and so forth. Well, now UK is now considering using of smartphones or mobile phones while driving as illegal, and you can face up to almost $300, $269 when you are caught here. Let's see here. So obviously, safety is the number one issue here that, you know, everyone is trying to focus here. That, you know, no one wants to be in an accident, be injured, or even, you know, die. The worst case scenario here. But is it enough to change the behavior of people when obviously one of the reasons when they go into an accident is not just being distracted, but is the car moving too fast? And obviously it's a symptom of a bigger problem, and addressing minor issues doesn't necessarily address the biggest issue here, which is the safety here. And obviously, even the government who announced it, that the ban of handheld. Actually, my question here is, would they still allow drivers to answer phones using their Bluetooth? Obviously, they're not touching the phone. They can use voice command. Obviously, we haven't reached to that point in some cases here. So obviously, the point here is to car safety here, not just for the passenger, the driver, as well as, you know, people on the streets here, which is, you know, kind of dangerous here. Anyway, the implementation will be effective sometime next year. So they will ban those drivers who play games or scroll their music playlist while driving. So obviously, it gives an opportunity for companies to develop better products in terms of being able to use voice command or air gestures, or actually more on voice command, typical how in Star Trek films, you see the computer is able to do what the user is asking. Computer, turn off lights. Computer, turn on lights, and so forth. So, can we reach that point that I think we have the technology here, obviously, for companies to develop it and integrate it in our vehicles, and that's the on onus on our car manufacturers here. And obviously, making cars more safe is one thing, but providing more features, not just safety for the drivers, but also for the car that it inhibits in terms of its roads, pedestrian, motorcycles, and even cyclists on the roads here. And question is, it goes beyond addressing, limiting or banning, what do you call this? Banning usage of phones in vehicles here. So prohibiting the use of mobile phones and our devices while driving. Now, violators will be punished if they are caught in the act. Okay. Now, obviously, punishing people for doing dangerous stuff, will it get the intended result, which is, will it lead to less incidents, less deaths here? I think that's why the problem is more symptomatic, and there's a bigger problem that they need to address here. And I think one of the main issues here, as mentioned, is that cars are moving too fast. So it's not just being distracted, and again, calling Tesla, trying to market something that is not yet capable of doing, being fully autonomous, making the driver even more distracted to the point of being complacent, relying too much on technology, which it hasn't reached to that point, can be dangerous here. And obviously, there will be less accidents, deaths, if cars are not moving that fast. And I've recently watched a channel who was highlighting how the Netherlands urban planning was tremendous in terms of being car friendly as well as bicycle friendly for people to move about, moving from one place to another, making it safe for the environment, and ensuring that vehicles that are drivers who are driving their vehicles on the roads are focused, attentive on actually driving. So which lessens the distraction and lessens the chances of being in an accident. And obviously, we want to avoid it if it's possible, but obviously, making roads, not necessarily making the roads wider, is not necessarily the better solution here. And as the Netherlands have shown, creating chicanes, more turns, making one lane rather than two lanes, so that drivers are more attentive, so that it would cause less accidents, so that people are focusing on the driving. Now, what Tesla is doing, if they can achieve it in the future, which is not anytime soon, if fully autonomous is possible, then you can 100% rely on the technology, then I'm all for it. But I think for the meantime, we're still a long ways in terms of reaching that capability here. And I think Elon Musk's marketing that the car is ready is a big being irresponsible in a sense. I think even their engineers have already mentioned that Elon Musk is overreaching in terms of its capability here, not taking away of its impact of providing electric vehicles for the mass market, which is another discussion altogether here. But going back to the point here, and obviously the government needs to do more and understand what causes an accident. Is it just being distracted? Is it the road conditions? Obviously, a human being is not perfect, and we have limitations. And I think government has to understand that, so that we can make a better, safe environment, not just for vehicles, but for people who are outside of the vehicle. Because people inside the cars are safe in a sense, because if it's between a bicycle or a pedestrian, obviously those people will be always in an advantage compared versus a vehicle here. And at the end of the day, we want everyone to be safe, and people should have option as to what types of modes of transportation they prefer, whether walking, riding a bike, public transportation, or even a vehicle here. We should have that flexibility or option here. And obviously encouraging, it would look kind of counterintuitive. Limiting cars on the road would help increase safety, and have a better ecosystem with roads, peoples, and vehicles, and etc. here. But obviously, it's a more daunting task here because obviously change is not something everyone is willing to do, and especially it needs substantial change here if we want to make our roads more safer. Not necessarily, I don't know, based on what was discussed and what I've read, that making the roads wider, we have a perception that we have little to no perception of how fast the vehicle are moving. But if you make it very narrow, or there are turns that you have to make, so we have this better perception of it's too narrow. We need to drive slower so we don't, we don't get involved in an accident, or and so forth, or even our cars getting involved in an accident or bumping to other people and so forth. Anyway, that ends for interesting discussion. I think discussed too much. Hopefully, you've gained a lot more appreciation. But if you have any questions regarding our topics today, feel free to leave your comments down below, and I'll try to get back to you. Obviously, for all the topics that we've discussed here, obviously we want companies or even governments to make an effort to help, not just make a quick buck to generate revenue for yourselves, but obviously have the long-term relationship with your customers here, whether moviegoers, uh, 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 people who buy your products and services and whatnot here. And obviously in the long run, it benefits companies that they're able to do more, not just get focus too much on the bottom line of generating more profit to showcase to their shareholders in the long run. But anyway, that concludes our episode. If you enjoyed this live stream, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. As always, I'll see you in the next one. Same bat time ish, and same channel. Take care.